5 after start time, so we'll get moving here. It's great to see, I was going to say faces, but a lot of black screens. It's great to see y'all on the night. Thank you for joining for July's Communications Department Zoom-Torial. Today I'm going to talk about some tips and tricks for Grange newsletters, Grange magazines. And I was initially going to like pick apart some state Grange newsletters or some local newsletters that I've seen, but I've decided to be nice tonight. And I just want to say from the start, there is no bad way to get information out. That if you are putting together a newsletter or a magazine or something in that format, then you are ahead of the curve from many Granges that are out there. The reason that we want to talk about this and the reason that I want to encourage everybody to do newsletters, and I don't just mean print newsletters, even email newsletters, is because we have moved to a social media focused world, which in other Zoom-torials, I praise social media. You all know that. I think it's a great way to connect, but not everybody's on social media. And in fact, more and more, the younger generations are not joining Facebook. The younger generations are not joining Instagram even these days, of where our generation and people even older than me and people who are used to that initial static kind of social media, the youth aren't living in those places, and a lot of the public aren't even joining these sites anymore. So returning to newsletters seems to be the modern way to go. And even more than that, just a simple email newsletter. According to a 2020 global email benchmarks data report, nonprofits, which includes the Grange, have the highest email open rate in emails, coming in at over 25% of all nonprofits have their emails consistently opened, which seems low that it's only 25% of your emails get opened, but that's pretty darn good. And nonprofits also see some of the highest click-through and click-to-open rates. So click-through would be clicking a link to go to a website out of your email, and click-to-open rates would be clicking to open an image, a PDF, something that downloads to your computer, if it's an attached newsletter, those kind of things. So click-through rates are at 2.6%, which is about industry average, actually. And click-to-open is at 10.3%, which is pretty high for a click-to-open kind of thing. So tonight, I want to have a conversation. I want you all to be involved and jump in, share your stories, share your successes, share things that you've learned to do, what not to do, as I kind of hit some major bullet points. I decided not to do a PowerPoint tonight because sometimes I get lost in the PowerPoints instead of just talking. So it's just us tonight, so get used to my face. The biggest thing that I want to talk about is making your communications consistent and relevant. I think one of our biggest problems that I see Granges face is that, especially from the local level, I think state Granges have this more figured out, but from the local level, one newsletter a year, they're coming out sporadically. They don't have a relevant message to them. They just seem to be, oh yeah, we remembered that we should probably do a newsletter. Consistency doesn't mean every month. It doesn't mean every week. One of my Granges does a quarterly newsletter. So 3 months worth of information at once. And our Grange members have come to anticipate that arriving in their email. My other Grange, our lecturer, thankfully does it. And he does a monthly newsletter for us, which is great. It's about 8 pages long, and it has exactly what you need. All the information in it is relevant. There's not a ton of fluff, and it's pretty easy to get through then. But I think what we have to think about is what works for the people who are doing the newsletter as far as consistency, and what does your Grange need in terms of consistency. So what makes people read a newsletter? Go. One acronym I want you all to think about tonight, if you leave with nothing else, it's WIIFM. What's in it for me? And that's what your members are looking for. Whoever is reading your newsletter, what's compelling them to open it is what do they think they're going to get out of it. So if your newsletters have become over time full of irrelevant information or fluff pieces or they're cluttered or unfocused or something like that, there's going to be less in it for me, for the reader, and that's what causes them to stop being engaged. So the more that you're able to prove the relevance of your newsletter, that's what's going to be important for anybody who's popping in to read it. I think one of the most important things to remember is that we should always assume that there are fresh eyes reading your content. We live in an age where even though you might only be emailing your newsletter to members, you might also post a link to it on your social media page, on your Facebook. There are always people from outside the organization reading the newsletter. There are always people who aren't familiar with our terms, who aren't familiar with what's happening in your Grange. So I always assume that somebody is seeing something for the very first time. And that's why, from my perspective at the National Grange, a lot of what is posted on our social media channel, the graphics, the images, will reappear in either Grange Today newsletter or the Good Day magazine, because not everybody of our 150,000 members nationwide, I don't have 150,000 followers on social media. And that also means that people can have the option of sharing them outside of the circle who's used to seeing them. So your newsletter is the best place to get the most information to the most people at once. And then you just have to encourage people to read it, is step one. So going through tonight, I'm just going to hit some bullet points, some things that we should consider about, there's a little bit about layout, but it's mostly about content tonight, and how we create content and make our content more relevant. And one of the first things is to determine the purpose of your newsletter. Newsletters have various purposes in the nonprofit world. There are fundraising newsletters, there are content-driven newsletters, there are events-focused newsletters, there are newsletters that are more reflective and look back on what has happened instead of forward-focused. So you have to find and determine what your purpose and relevance is. Is it going only to Grange members, or do you hope that it's only going to Grange members? Do you want it to go out into the public? And then that brings the question of who is the general public that might read the newsletter? Does anybody know or have an idea of how you would define general public?
I mean, I would define general public as, anybody in my community who has the potential to become a member.
Okay, good.
Or at least a participant in our events.
The general public is anybody who's not already on the inside. And one of the problems with defining who the general public is that to speak to everyone, you end up speaking to nobody. So one of the things that I think about when writing a newsletter is including articles that are for people from the inside as well as for people from the outside. Some articles will appeal to different audiences. So having the articles that are Grange focused, or having the information that is super Grange focused and your members already know what you're talking about, is important, as well as having the more general informational articles or things that go in to appeal to people from the outside. People who may become members or who may come into your Grange at some point or another. But then that also brings the question of how jargony can we be? There are terms in the Grange that we use, those of us that are on this Zoom tonight, use frequently that others from the outside don't know. Terms like Pomona for a level of the Grange. Recurring events that we have even in your local Grange, saying the conferral of the degrees means something to those of us that are on here and means nothing to anybody who is not already a Grange member. Even offices, contests, the things that we sometimes take for granted as Grange members can actually damage us when people from the outside are reading our newsletter. So being careful to either explain the terms sometimes or explain it once, Maybe there's an FAQ at some point, a full issue FAQ of here are the terms of the Grange, or a link to a website that explains those kind of things, to make sure that your audience feels that they have an in some way, that they are able to connect with you. And I think that's one of the things that will keep us credible and relevant, is making sure that people who know nothing about the Grange or who are coming in with a base level knowledge also feel included in what we're talking about. I like that, Wendy. Wendy put in the comments, footnotes on the last page. That's a great idea. So there's a couple, I'm going to be a little contradictory tonight and potentially hit some things that may seem backwards from other things that I'm going to talk about tonight, because there is no one size fits all answer to Grange newsletters. There's no one size fits all to marketing, because we all live in different different organizations, different communities, different ways that we connect with what's going on. So I say keep it simple and keep it focused as far as your newsletter. So I think some people want to go in and go big with their first newsletter right away. You don't need to do that. If you've never done one before, your newsletter can be as simple as a couple typed pages in Microsoft Word that are saved as a PDF and emailed out to your members. That's fine. That's a newsletter and that counts. It can be put directly in the body of your email. That is fine as well. If that's the capacity that your Grange has in this moment, that is perfectly acceptable. As long as you're finding a way to make sure that people who don't have email also have access to that information. Since 2020, I've noticed that print newsletters are back up on the rise. People being stuck at home for so long during COVID, doing nothing but being online, has actually led to a slide of people wanting to connect that way. And so more people now want physical reminders or physical things in their hands, such as postcards or newsletters that they want to read and connect to. But I also understand that that's costly and not budget focused. So if you're working on a budget, maybe you only print for the members that absolutely don't have email. Maybe you're only prepped to to print a couple copies that you're able to hand out at your next meeting. So whatever works for you, again, is what's important. And then keeping it focused is, what is the hierarchy of articles? If you're doing an email newsletter, especially, people might read the first 3 or 4 headlines and the first 3 or 4 articles. You can probably guarantee about 90% of people who open have read the first scroll, and then maybe 50% of people read the second scroll, and then maybe 25 read the third scroll, and maybe 5% of the people who open it have actually read all the way to the bottom of your newsletter. So if the most important information that you want people to glean from your newsletter is at the bottom, you're doing yourself a disservice and you're not hitting the target audience that you want to hit. So figure out what the most important things are and put on page 1, and then start kind of scrolling your way down from there. Figure out what can be missed, or if you're doing some newsletters in advance and you're, if you have a monthly, upcoming events far out can be on the very last page, because people might not make it that far. And then I also think one of the things about keeping it focused is asking yourself, is there intention in the articles that you're writing? Is everything worthwhile, or are officers or directors or whomever submitting writing articles just because they're being asked to, or because they feel that they have to as an officer? I will pick on myself at this point, because I used to ask every director of every department to submit something at least once a quarter to Patrons Chain when that was around, and realized that not all of those articles were fruitful, and not all of those articles were member focused. And so figuring out what the most important things to get to our members are, and sometimes your officers have something important to say. Often they have something important to say, but not always. So ask yourself, is everything that's going in here relevant? Is it the most important information that I need to put out? Or can I hold off and keep some of these articles for later? Can they be filler pieces? Can they be fluff pieces? Do we always need, for instance, a chaplain's corner? Does the lecturer always need an article? These are sometimes, and depending on what you want the focus of your newsletter or magazine to be, the answer might be yes, I do always want those to be in there. But you can also evaluate from time to time to say, I don't know that these are the most important things, or if by adding this one column, I now need to add 4 pages to make it scan. I know, Susie, you have that problem sometimes. Um, you have to ask yourself, I mean, for Good Day magazine, if I reach a certain point, I don't have to add 4 pages, I have to add 16 pages to the magazine to make it work. And then do I have 16 extra pages of content, or am I just filling it with fluff? I think is really important. And I'm also going to look at Good Day as an example of something that reaches internally and externally. There are articles in Good Day magazine, like in the State of Rural America section, that have absolutely nothing to do with the Grange, but have everything to do with what's happening in rural America. The news and views section is entirely Grange focused and is entirely focused on what's happening in the National Grange or at the state Grange level or for our members. And then as you go through the ideas section, there's a little bit of both. There's some totally Grange focused stuff, and there's some stuff from the outside that your Grange might want to incorporate or that a member might want to grab. So mixing in that content is really important. And maybe there's a budding writer in your Grange. I just started, again, in Good Day, a new section called Community Voices that's focused on writers. If you have a story to tell, if you are a poet, if you have something to write about, and you want to share your story, that's what the Community Voices section is now about. And I'm probably only going to run one of those per issue, but it's something new that's letting people who want the experience and now can say that they're a published author as well, have that voice in the Grange and in their area. And it's not hard to ask, you know, your local newspaper. If you see something that was written by your local newspaper, it's not hard to ask them permission to reprint their article. And they will give you the guidelines on, yes, you can reprint it, or no, you can't. And if you reprint it, make sure that you use our byline, and here's maybe a tag to put on the end of it to say originally printed in the newspaper, and send people that direction. So finding that mix for local Granges of local content, something from school, something from the newspaper, something from churches in the region, whatever it might be, that might also appeal to your members, in addition to the Grange news, I think is really important. Sorry, I'm also getting over a cold, which is really fun. So what are, oh, and on that note, when I said keep it simple and keep it focused, I think there's a tendency to believe in a lot of things that because something's long means that it's good. More pages does not mean that your newsletter is better. I've seen some exceptional 4-page newsletters that have gotten the information that they need to get out. There might be something fun or fluffy in it as well, but anything longer than that, the Grange might have not had the news to share. And to make it longer than it needs to be isn't necessary. So do the length that works for you and works for your Grange. And you might find that it's a front and back of 1 page. You might find that it is a simple 4-page fold kind of newsletter. You might find that it's 8 pages, whatever it is. Just remember that there's no target length that is the perfect length. Whatever works for you. So if it's 4 pages and you've said what you need to say, then you can stop. Don't give yourself permission to hit that point and say, I think we're good, and be happy with it. And there are also times when you reach a point and you just say, it's got to go in the email today, so we're done with it, no matter how good it is right now. I think we've all been there as well. So what kind of things, how many of you have a newsletter already? Susie, you don't need to raise your hand. So what kinds of things do you like sharing? Oh, hi, Molly. What kinds of things do you guys like sharing besides Grange news in your newsletters? If you share anything besides Grange news.
Philip?
Yeah.
I thought, what I have done, I've been very remiss in the last month, 2 months in getting my newsletters out, other than just throwing for some emails. But we had at one time a state rep who was a member, and we have actually a new state rep who is now a member. I need to get hit her up to do an article every week,
Awesome.
or not every week. I'm sorry, every month.
Just about to say you do a weekly newsletter. Goodness,
No,
I know
no.
Plumstead Hill is busy, but
No, I don't have time for that. I'm already juggling enough balls on it.
no, I like that. I like it's kind of like your little legislative corner that affects your district, and I love that. It's a great idea.
And what her positions are. And the other thing that we do, kind of relating back to the community section, is that we operate a farm market, and we also have other things. And we always put up a little sign-up sheet. What would you like to get our newsletter? And all they need is an email, and I use MailChimp.
Mm.
So there's always a little badge there, like unsubscribe, click here. Sometimes people, they come to one event, they get a few things. Every once in a while, maybe they'll come up and say, oh, well, I know somebody who's might be a vendor for your farm market. They'll get in touch that way. So
It's great. No, I like that. Yeah, how many of you put sign-up sheets out for your newsletter at your events? Okay, well, I'm going to tell you that's a great way to get people involved. Is anytime you do an event, I've seen some Granges, with the handwritten leave your name and email address. I've seen another Grange that has an online Google form that they have an iPad set up at their events, and they can just boop, 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 type their information directly into the iPad. Then the emails are already collected and spelled correctly, because I know I've had a hard time deciphering some handwritten emails before. So that, if you have Wi-Fi connectivity at your event, just popping it right into the iPad, that Google form. It's 2 questions, their name and their email address. And that's all you really need. Maybe a zip code if you really want to know where you're connecting with people. But what else do you guys drop in your newsletters?
It's been a little bit, but something that we've done a couple times is have like a craft that they could do. I know one time I made Kimber submit an article on how to do it was like a recycled craft using, or an ornament using a can lid. And
Oh, cool.
so it had like what you needed and the steps to make it and a picture. So it was just something simple, but it could engage people. And you could probably do that with your programs and stuff. Like if you have a recycled craft in your junior program or family activities or whatever you all call them, you could use it. So, I don't know, that might be good. And I think Mandy had been working on recipes, trying to put recipes in from our recent idea meetings and stuff.
Yeah, so we have, like Molly said, so if you didn't know, we're sisters and we're co-editors of our newsletter. Yeah, I am also our state lecturer, but we were trying to put recipes, because everyone's like, oh, this is a really great recipe from one of our quarterly meetings. And so we were collecting recipes to put in so people could have them. And then also I've taken stuff from old publications that Kansas State Grange put out just to add to my lectures article, because while I am wordy, I'm pretty succinct when it comes to my articles. So I try to fill my page and I put like a poem or home remedies. It's called, I actually have it. Sorry. This cool book.
Oh yeah.
Ethan's practical pamphlet. We have 2 of them, and it has all this old stuff that's kind of cool. So it's a little nostalgic, but it's also stuff that is coming back around, especially with like the homesteaders and things. So I put that in there.
That's great. Yeah, I was gonna say recipes are always a hit, and always something that if you have a half page to fill when you're done, or a quarter page, you can almost always find a recipe. And I will let you know that any recipe, I I'm allowed to say this as communications director of the National Grange. Any recipe that has been published in a Grange cookbook, in a National Grange cookbook, you have permission to reprint in your newsletters. So if there's something in a National Grange cookbook, I can't make that carte blanche for state Grange or local Grange cookbooks, but I can say that for the National Grange. And especially because most of ours are almost 30, 40 years old at this point at the newest from the national level. So feel free to use those recipes if you have a little bit of space to fill. You'll see that I sometimes post them on Facebook as well, on social media. When it's National Apple Day, when it's National Egg Day, those kind of things are a great little tie-in, depending on when your newsletter's hitting. So I also like the idea of showing off and highlighting contests. How-to guides are a big hit for contests. I also love dropping in, if there's space, quizzes, crosswords, word searches. They do really well in printed newsletters, not so great in e-newsletters because they're much harder to fill out and circle things on your computer screen. But they really help engage your members too. And you can make a contest out of it of first person who drops this off at the lecture station at the next meeting gets a small prize. It's a great way to engage your members twice in a way, once when they receive the newsletter, and again, as a reminder to bring it to a meeting and participate at the meeting as well. There are other things that you can do, like find a hidden image in the newsletter somewhere. Count how many Grange emblems are dropped in this newsletter. And it doesn't just have to be, in a logo. I've seen, I have designed a Grange emblem to be a bullet point before. So you can do that as well. So things like that are engaging and can make people read parts of the newsletter that they might not have gotten to before, can be pretty interesting.
I'm gonna say we
So
added a page too.
What was that?
We added a coloring page at one
Oh,
point.
yes.
Yeah.
Coloring pages are great.
Mhm.
Other things, if you're looking for content, the National Grange's Junior Passport Program is always available to reprint. Just let me know and I can get you in a format that works for you. Anything that is published in Grange Today is republishable. If you want to republish something that's been in Good Day, just ask me and I will work with you to see if it's reprintable or not. Since I sometimes get articles in Good Day from other people, I don't always have permission to pass them beyond our magazine, but a lot of things I do. So if you see an article in there, just ask and I'll see what's doable out of Good Day. And that's also a way to connect your members on the local level to what's happening at the National Grange as well through those publications. And I'll also give you the proper wording of republished from Grange Today, Volume 1, Issue 4, blah, blah, blah. That information that needs to be out there just for copyright protections and kind of cover your butt in case somebody decides to get litigious, which would be me and I won't, but just in case. So one of the things that makes people read anything is trying to find themselves in it. So there are two big points here for your Grange newsletter, and that's featuring your members and featuring your community. And that's featuring your members can be as simple as photos of your members in action at meetings. We recently, in our Eagle Grange newsletter, a group of us went to the Crosscutters, which is our local minor league team. And seeing that picture of us in the newsletter made somebody very happy that she was in our newsletter because she said she hadn't been before. And we're like, great, well, welcome to the club. But your members want to see your members. I recommend starting something like a member of the month or a member of the quarter, recognizing your longtime members for their service, for being involved. And the same can be a great way to integrate your Grange into the community and your community into the Grange by recognizing something like your small business of the month or of the quarter, or a farm. If you live in a rural area, highlighting a farm, highlighting a farm market, something that connects your community into the Grange. And that's a great way to get community members who are not engaged with Grange content to engage with your newsletter as well. If somebody says, hey, I saw that your farm market was featured in Wallingford's newsletter, and they're like, I didn't even know that. And then they, ask somebody to get a copy of it. I think that's a great way to make that connection. For any budding reporters, having an eyes on local section of here's what's happening in, for some granges, they operate fully within a township, they operate fully within a small area, and they can report on, here's what's happening at the township level, here's what's happening at our community level, that in the government, or something in that form, to say, keep your members engaged with the community as well. We have a habit, not just in the Grange, but in many organizations, to become insular at some point, and to really start focusing only on our needs. And sometimes we forget to reflect back to the outside, and see what our community needs from us. And then I also say, there's a thing called beneficiary stories. So who are the people who are benefiting from your work as well? So Forbes, because I read Forbes for fun, because I'm a nerd, says that storytelling should be a key aspect of marketing because it deepens the audience's connection with your brand. So use the storytelling of your beneficiaries. Granges are uniquely positioned to tell stories because of the genuine good work that we do in our community and the genuine good that we provide for our community. We don't do it because we want to make the Grange feel good. We do it genuinely because we want the people who are receiving to feel good. So the people who benefit from Grange's actions over the years, these are our most powerful social proof that we have helped somebody. And it feels in a way a little like we're using them to get people to join the Grange, but it's also hearing their story of here's how I was impacted, here's where I am now. And again, people want to hear about themselves. If I've been impacted by something and I'm asked to write an article, or I'm asked to be interviewed for something, then I will read the issue that my thing is in, and will also probably pass it on to my family. But beneficiary stories also help your members put a face to your organization's work, to put a face to the Grange's work. Not all of your members come to everything that you do. Not all of your members show up for community service events. Not all members are able to be there when you present a check or take the toys to Toys for Tots or whatever it is that you're doing. So even for your members to see the good that you're doing in the community is great, to remind them of the human impact that they're having. And I think that's something different than our standard Grange news, which can sometimes be dull, not the most interesting read. No offense to any president who writes a monthly or quarterly president's column, but sometimes they're not that interesting. Sorry, John. But I think it's a way to humanize your newsletter. Finding the ways to keep your newsletter focused on the people and not on the Grange, I think, is a great way to bring your newsletter into the public eye as well. And then, so Sam earlier talked about looking for registration forms. And that's one way to keep your members engaged as well, is including links to sign up forms for volunteer events, your registration forms for your Grange's events, but also if you can, and if you have the lead time, to get them for state and national Grange events, to encourage your members to connect beyond your Grange. I think is a great way to keep things growing and keep members focused and engaged beyond the local Granges. Wendy earlier said about putting a footnote section at the bottom of the last page for our jargon and that kind of stuff. I would love to see, and I'm going to challenge all of you who are on here tonight, I would love to see an FAQ section start appearing in somebody's newsletter in the form almost of a Dear Abby column. It can be written by a Grange historian. It can be written by one of your officers, maybe your president, where somebody writes a question that might seem like common Grange knowledge and send it in, and it becomes almost an FAQ to say, like, dear so-and-so, why does the Grange do this? And why is this important in our meetings? Or what is the Grange's history and stance on these kinds of things? And then having somebody give a thorough, researched answer that's more personal at the same time, and not just like, well, our history says that in 1867, finding the ways to make it a personal one-on-one story, making it humane in some way. Oh, Suzanne, I'm sorry. I just saw your comment whenever I switched screens here. So Suzanne, who's the California State Grange lecturer, commented that she highlights her junior Grange and youth fair participants and winners in their summer newsletter. And I love that. That's a great way to connect those kids as well. Kids love seeing their pictures in things. My nephews recently had their picture in our county fair brochure, and were walking around church charging people $10 for their autograph on their picture. So that's my nephews for you. But they were so excited to see, and it's the tiniest picture in the world, but they could tell it was them. And, just the excitement in them was palpable that, look, we made it into the county fair brochure. Okay, back to FAQs. The other thing that you can then do with all of the FAQs, whether it's Dear Abby style or just, one or two FAQs in a newsletter, is to then start compiling them all so that your Grange has its own personalized FAQ, frequently asked questions section, so that when a Grange member or somebody new comes into your Grange, you can now have a document compiled out of a year's worth of newsletters, or, a couple years worth, that you can immediately email to them when they join your Grange and say, here are some questions that people have or have had in the past about our Grange. And these are questions that you might have, and we've got some answers ready for you, so that you don't have to stand around a meeting going, well, I think that the reason that we do this is because, give people the answers right away and upfront with those FAQs, and repurpose them, revisit them over and over again to make sure that everything is up to date, depending on what the question is. So when it comes to images in your newsletter, high quality photos work. If you have a smartphone, putting it on the highest quality setting will be more than enough for your local newsletter. It's more than enough for my State Grange newsletter and for the National Grange newsletter. So it will certainly work for your local newsletter. And that's, if you don't know how to change the settings on your phone, shoot me an email and I will Google it for you, and I will tell you how to access your photo settings. And then there are also, have your members take photos anywhere that they are, anywhere people are involved in things. I'm encouraging more and more people to spread the wealth and share the burden of our newsletters, so that there are more people participating in the process, and understanding what it takes to put something together when, when there's 30 people working at an event and only one person's taking pictures, then that one person is never in any of those photos. Which for me, that's okay. I don't need to be in the photos. But some people would like to see themselves from time to time and know that they were part of the process as well. So I've been encouraging more members to take pictures anywhere that they are, that the Grange name is out there and they're being involved. So any graphic, any image that is taken by a member, you can assume that you have the legal use to use. If you want to draw something up that says that they have given you the rights to use their photos, let me know. I have some basic forms of that type ready that I can send to you to edit. But other than that, the images that you use need to be legally obtained. And one thing that I see in a lot of Grange newsletters is what appear to be New Yorker comics that I'm pretty sure they don't have the right to use, because the New Yorker doesn't just give Granges the right to use their comics. And that's the same for, clip art's generally usable if you're able to find it online. But there are definitely like free clip art websites. There are websites like Canva that are free to use, and I will praise Canva until I die, because you can create your own graphics that way if you want to use them. But you can't just assume that doing a Google image search gives you the right to download that information and to download and use that photo. So I'm going to toss my favorite free photo websites at you again. And that's unsplash.com, pexels.com, pixabay.com. Vecteezy is a new one that I started using recently. I do believe you can get a paid subscription to Vecteezy. And then I also use Wikimedia. So photos that are uploaded to Wikipedia become part of Wikimedia. And you have the rights to use them with the proper credit. So when you go into the photo to download it, it will tell you, here, let me show you guys an example here. Get to a page. Oh, here's what I'll do. I'll go to wikipedia.org/National Grange. Boop, 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 boop. Okay, so if I'm on the National Grange's Wikipedia page, and I decide that I want to use this promotional poster of the Grange, I will click on it, and I will see where it is. And in the bottom right corner here, it is unlocked because it is in the public domain, which means I have the right to download and reprint this. It will give me all the information I need about it in this screen. And then move my Grammarly box here out of the way. There's this licensing link that will tell me what I need to know about it. So this one says it's in Commons licensing. Wikimedia Commons only accepts free content, which means that I have the right to reprint it. And so there are sometimes that you'll see, to use this, you must credit found via Wikimedia or wikimedia.org and give you the information. This one does say that a copyright tag is still required under Commons licensing, but I don't see it on this one. Maybe if I would. Nope, that didn't help. Somewhere in this mumbo jumbo here. Oh, there. I would use that right there. Would tell me the original information. So the Gift of the Grangers, courtesy of J. Hale Powers and Co., Fraternity and Fine Art Publishers, Cincinnati, would be one of the ways that I would credit it. You could also credit it as available via the Library of Congress, because that's Library of Congress Prints and Photographs Edition. One of the other ones that I did use, let me see. Aha. So I used this one in Good Day Magazine. It was this picture of the Celebration Bell. And used this little tag right here. The CC BY-SA 3.0 is the Creative Commons license that says I have the right to use this photo outside of Wikimedia. And that's a whole lot of mumbo jumbo to say it's legal for me to do this. As long as I have that tag. I think this was in the April edition of Good Day. If it wasn't this photo, it was another one very similar to this one, that said photo via Wikimedia covered by Creative Commons license CC BY-SA 3.0. But there are other ways to do it. If you're using something from Unsplash, when you download, unsplash.com will give you a little tag on how to credit Unsplash. Same with Adobe stock. You'll even see in Good Day, and actually in this next issue of Grange Today that I'm working on, there's a tag to say that a photo is from iStock and Getty Images. Just letting people know that you have the rights to do it, and you're recognizing that it's not your photo, it's not your graphic, that it belongs to somebody else is very important and protects you as an individual. It protects your Grange, and it protects the National Grange as well. In case, like I said earlier, somebody decides to get litigious that you are using their photos. And then other things to include, we're getting close to the end here. Other things to include in your newsletter are your social media links. Not everybody who picks up your newsletter is on social media, and vice versa. Not everybody who's on social media is getting your newsletter. So to say something quick, like Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Plumsteadville Grange. Find us on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/New Jersey State Grange. Find us on X or Threads or Instagram, whatever social media, Twitter. Twitter doesn't exist. That is X. TikTok. Find us on Snapchat. Maybe your Grange has a Snapchat channel or a YouTube channel. Whatever kind of social media you are on and active on is important to share. And that way people who are picking up your newsletter, you know, out in the wild know where else they can go to find you. For example, if you're leaving your newsletters in your Grange hall and somebody's renting your Grange hall for a birthday party and the mother of Billy's friend is there and she's like, I want to know more about this, but all she has is your newsletter. At least now she has more places to find you online. And then how many of you include contact information in your newsletters? If you have them. Jane, good. Susie, of course, does. Wendy does. Suzanne does. Good. So sharing at least your core officers' contact information. So I would say that's your president, your lecturer, your secretary, and maybe the chairperson of your executive committee. If you have a Grange hall, first of all, but if you have a rentals manager, including that contact information, maybe your membership, youth and junior chair, those kind of contacts are really important to include at least once a year, or a link to say, find our contact information for our members somewhere else, to let people know how they can get in contact with somebody. If you're only able to list one email, if you only have the space for it, if it's of the president or of the newsletter editor, make sure that it's somebody who actually reads and opens their email and responds, because I've seen newsletters where, you know, you send off, and this isn't necessarily Grange, it could be a church bulletin or something, where somebody puts in their contact information but then never responds to anything because, oh, well, you know, I just don't have the time. Unfortunately, people want to contact organizations that have the time. So make sure that you're putting in contact information of people who are ready to respond to somebody from the public, should they contact them. And then there are just two other quick things to talk about. One is maintaining brand consistency. So the communication fellows don't know this yet, but when I start working with them this year, one of the things that we are working on is a brand consistency handbook from the National Grange, which is going to be a very short document of, here's proper ways to use the logo, here's improper ways to use the logo. Don't use it this way, use it this way. Here's what you can legally do to change the logo, here's what you can't. Here are the colors of the National Grange, blah, 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 those kind of things. You can have that same thing for your Grange as well. You might not want to use the National Grange's blue and gold, but instead have decided that your Grange's colors are periwinkle and plum. Could be an interesting combination, actually. But you can say, you know, being consistent from newsletter to newsletter of how those things appear is really important, because you are creating yourself a brand. And people understand, especially, you know, I can open an email from the North Carolina State Grange and I know immediately that it's from them because of the dark blue background that they use, because of their logo at the top of it. It's very eye-catching and it's striking for me that as soon as I open it, I know for sure that it's them. The Oregon State Grange Bulletin is the only newsprint bulletin that arrives at my house anymore. So as soon as I see that, you know, in my inbox, I know that that's exactly what it is. And Susie, who manages that and is the editor of that, does a fantastic job at it, maintaining the consistency of the look throughout the entire magazine, throughout the entire newsletter. So subscribers should know, or whoever's receiving it should know, that as soon as they open it, that it's yours. My Penns Valley Grange newsletter has the same blue bar down the side of it of every issue, so that, and it contains the same information every time of our contact information, upcoming events, those kind of things are always there. And then I just want to say that white space is not the enemy. I think people want to fill every inch of a page with information, to the point where I've gotten some print newsletters where the columns, the side-by-side columns on a page run so close to each other that it almost feels like you should be reading straight across. Ensuring that the readability is there is really important from a layout side, because it makes it readable. If if it's not readable, if the print is so small or so condensed and everything's running together, add 4 more pages and give yourself more space to breathe, but also realize that people aren't going to be able to access the content because it's not accessible. They can't access it because it's not accessible. That is what I said. So being ready to understand it and adapt is really important. So for anybody who's starting, I did want to show one quick thing, and I'm going to go back to my near and dear canva.com here. Okay. If you have a Canva account and you would like to start your own newsletter in these templates here, Canva templates, there are about 100 different newsletter options here. So I'm going to do a quick search. If you don't know where to start, starting with a pre-made template is the best and smartest thing that you can do. Even if you just want to refresh what you're currently doing, it's a great way to start. So I'm going to look for one that's free. This one is free. We're going to go into customizing. So everything in here is so easy for you to start typing. 33. I hate that I know these things. But starting the way that you can drop in your own information, they make it so easily editable for you. So this, for instance, is grouped as one giant text box, but then you have the option to jump in and edit each little section of it as you go. A nice little breakdown of what to expect in the newsletter, you know, a photo that's to stand out. And this one's a 4-pager, but you can delete, add pages as you go. You know, it really is Photoshop for dummies. This would be a great spot to look at that volunteer spotlight in here. Staff profile highlights. This would be a great spot to highlight an officer each month or somebody who's working to make your Grange strong. This back page, this is, look at that, built-in contact information. So this is a great template to start with. If you've never done a newsletter before, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are so many free templates available online for you to access. There's another one, if I could move my screen here, that I found. Let's see if that will open. So this website is template.net. And this is a great place to download some nonprofit newsletter formats that you can download and customize as you go. So this is template.net/nonprofit/non-profit-newsletter will get you to this page. And I believe there are free templates here. Some of these do have a nominal cost to them. But a lot of the ones on this website that I was working with earlier or trying to get to had the instant download options that let you adapt them to your needs and to your Grange's needs. So,
Hey, Phil, back
yes.
on Canva, I think like that one that you showed had 4 pages, but I
Yep.
think like design, it might, over on the left-hand side, it might give you
Oh, yeah.
options for, sometimes it'll give you options for more pages to add. I think it's in design. It might be, I could be wrong.
No, it's right. Sometimes there's a thing that pops up over here on the side. It's like,
Yeah.
in this template, here's how to edit. There's too many things. It's, you know why? It's because this one's designed as a letterhead for some reason and not as a newsletter template. So that's helpful.
I just wanted to mention that sometimes when you pull up and it only shows 4, there's
Yeah.
other options as well
Jump
that are
into
there.
yeah, this one looks like it's designed as a newsletter. Do.
Maybe I'm crazy.
No, you are right. Oh, here we go. So once I jumped into the newsletter format, there are other pages, like I could drop that page directly in and start using. So it's there. It's just gotta look for it and play with it. And again, yeah, thanks, Molly. Canva's another one of those sites that, you know, you can't, nothing's not undoable. So feel free to jump in and play. And if you do something wrong, undo it. It's pretty easy to jump backwards and get that working. So I could drop that page in there. And now you have a 2-page newsletter. So it's super easy to play with. I encourage all the time people to jump in and play with Canva because it's my favorite site in the world. So yeah. So where do we go from here, I think is the question. It's deciding if you need a newsletter, and I would encourage everyone to at least do a quarterly newsletter, maybe semi-annually would be a great way to start, and let yourself, maybe you do one in January and one in July to start. And then morph yourself into a quarterly format. I do think for local Granges, quarterly is often more than enough. Monthly, if you really want to challenge yourself and you have nothing better to do than create newsletters all the time, by all means, go ahead and go monthly. I know for those of us on this call right now are already the ones who do a bulk of the work for our Granges, it seems sometimes. So adding one more thing to your plate might not be in the cards right now, but there might be somebody in your Grange who has a secret talent of creating newsletters or putting content together that you don't know about. So find a way to do that. I encourage you to create your newsletter in more than one format as well. Like I said at the top, not everybody has an email address. Not everybody's on social media. So creating the print version of it or something that can be printed is really important. But I also think it is really important to take snippets of it and put on social media as well, so that the people who are yes, Eiley, become a stay-at-home Grange mom. If only that could be a full-time job, I would do that as well. So putting snippets up on social media of what's out of your newsletter is important for the people who maybe don't want to read a full newsletter but only need the basic information. I think is important. Okay, so are there any questions, any thoughts from tonight? Anything that you want to include but don't know how, or would like to stop including but don't know how to stop?
Okay.
You talked a little bit earlier about like the beginning. You're just starting out with a newsletter. I'm going to bash on our state for a few minutes. Our newsletter is only sent out to just our local Grange presidents, and it's in a Word document. So there's a lot of room for improvement in our state newsletter. But one of the things that we talked about to help make that improvement happen, because it's always hard for us to get the content, our content simply consists of a little update from each of our local Granges. Here's, a calendar of events, and that's pretty much sums up what's in our newsletter. So one of the things that we've talked about doing, and this may be helpful for those that are trying to start out or trying to encourage people to give something to, is we have a like a form that we just created that we're going to send out to our officers, to our Granges, for them to kind of have a template of what to write in, to answer a few questions like, what is your Grange done lately? That's great. What is, highlight a member, those kind of things to help formulate their, their articles that are going to go in. We're also, of course, going to be sharing some of the national stuff and putting it in there. But having those forms, I hope is going to be at least helpful. And then it'll be available to our members too, if anybody wants to spotlight, anything in particular that's going on.
Awesome. I love that idea. I think Pennsylvania could benefit from that as well.
I love that idea of a form, basically a form to fill out to help somebody write a column. Our Connecticut Granger monthly newsletter is pretty good. I mean, I think it looks pretty good. We have our media person is actually a professional. She's been in the printing industry forever. I was in the printing industry for like 25 years. So I can appreciate that with a practiced eye. But sometimes the articles can be a little dry and lengthy. And they always go with the master's desk, the secretary's desk, the, lecturer's desk, legislatively speaking. And what you were saying before with people with starting at the beginning and reading into it, maybe that's not always the greatest order of things.
Yeah.
I mean, what I do is I don't read it front to back. I jump into it and I glance at all the headlines and see who wrote what, at a glance, and then I'll go back over the course of the month and reread everybody's stuff, or somebody will say something and I'm like, I think that Bob Buck wrote something about that. And let me go look at the order, let me go look at the newsletter and see what he actually said, because I only glanced at his article, to begin with. So those are really interesting insights. Thanks, Phil.
Yeah.
And I should have known, because I do use Canva quite a bit. I didn't realize that they had so much fun newsletter templates, coming from the printing industry, and I miss the things I used to use. I miss Quark Express because it was I could do so much stuff in it, but I can do just as much stuff in Canva, just not from scratch. So
Yeah, actually my Penns Valley newsletter is based on a Canva template because I already do, Patrons Chain at the time and Good Day. I didn't have time to create another new template for our local Grange newsletter as well. So I, stole from the best and stole from Canva. So
our California State Grange newsletter that I do, I've transferred to Canva.
there you go.
And the cool thing with that is I put the electronic version on our social media,
Yep.
but I can also download as a PDF and it's sent out to everyone.
Awesome. That's the best way to do it. Jane, I think you started to say something earlier.
We're blessed in Thompsonville to have a lovely young woman comes from the marketing industry. I have some marketing background, but it's not really a newsletter, but it might be a start for people that don't know a lot. Is she's put together, and I can't see it, like a one-pager of like our events coming up, and we put this, like if we're having our fish fry in the spring, these are out on the tables. These are our upcoming French fish fries. We had a CPR training. We had a musician night for Grange Month, where we invited all sorts of local musicians to do their thing, and then our farm market opening, and then she updates this like every couple weeks, and these are available at our farm market too, like with the special events, like we had a Dairy Princess promotion at one of our events. We have musicians, special events, and these are she kind of just use this basic format, which you could just do like in Word. It's not hard.
Right. That one looks like it might actually be done in Canva. So
yeah, she might. I don't know what she does, but she does a great job. Thank you.
One thing that I didn't mention, that one looks really good, but one thing that I didn't mention earlier is that a lot of people who are starting out get really font happy and love playing with as many fonts as possible on things.
No.
Marketing standard says if there's more than 3 fonts on a page, you've gone too far. So that was the standard back when I was taking comms courses, still is the standard today. And that's part of your brand template as well, is figuring out what fonts work for you, what fonts don't. And that doesn't count logos necessarily, because the Grange Today logo alone has 2 fonts in it, but those fonts aren't used anywhere else in the newsletter. So that's a standalone graphic. So that's something to think about too, is making it readable and appealing. I have for Good Day magazine, we have 2 fonts that we use essentially. There's a third one that we sometimes drop in for fancier stuff. But there's essentially 2 fonts, and then it's whether it's bold, italic, whatever, everything's in that same font family at least, so it's not overwhelming. And that's one thing that keeps me, sane when I'm doing the newsletters. I don't have options. It's created, it's there, it's in my brand book, and that's the way that it works. So that's one thing to keep in mind too, is that I think some people want to go big and fancy from the beginning and keep it simple. There's no need to reinvent the wheel on any part of a newsletter. Great.
Some fonts are very hard to read.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. The readability and what's easy to read on a screen is not always easy to read in print, and vice versa. And what's easy to read for young eyes is not easy to read for old eyes. So remembering who your audience is and remembering who might be picking it up is also key and going to keep your newsletter credible and legible.
I'm a fonts lover, but I agree not to use more than two. But every font has a personality. So
Mhm.
once you figure out like what font looks best for the personality of your Grange, and then stick with that.
Yep.
And the other thing is negative type, like a white on black
Ooh.
tends to not be read. So if there's something you want to throw in there that you really don't want to draw a lot of attention to, then you could stick that in there. Sometimes that's like page numbers or something, like to have a little thing at somewhere but that's typically, that's the thing you want to do to draw less attention to something.
So if there's somebody's article that you don't want people to read, drop it on. I'm kidding. I do like, so Wendy commented here that when she starts a newsletter, they will reach out to the new people in their Grange and ask them what they want to get out of the newsletter. And that's important too. And could be a great way to start, is putting a survey out to your members of what would you, if you're starting a community Grange newsletter, what do you want to see? What frequency would you like to receive it? How would you like to receive it? Print, digital, both, neither, just an email. Figuring out what they can contribute as well is important. So if somebody wants to see recipes, do you have a recipe to share? Can be a great question. So that's a great way to also involve your members in that process. And I love that idea. Well, we're over the hour mark because I don't know when to shut up. So, so any final thoughts from anybody?
Our secretary does mail out a monthly email that basically summarizes the previous meeting and notes the dates of the upcoming happenings. And we do flyers like crazy. So we have a flyer that the lecturer puts out with like pretty much her whole year calendar on it. And then we flyer everything. But it's and we do quite a lot on Facebook. We're pretty active on Facebook. I'd like to get us into the other social medias. I didn't realize young people weren't using social media that much anymore.
Yeah, the youngsters are living on TikTok. That's where TikTok.
Well, that's easy because TikTok's a lot of fun.
TikTok is a lot of fun.
Catching the right algorithm to get out
Exactly.
into your community is a little harder.
Exactly. Finding out how to get on the FYP is really important to make yourself relevant. But yeah, the young people are not joining Facebook. They're not even joining Instagram now. And I've been told by my junior Grange members here in Pennsylvania that Facebook is old people social media. So I'm officially old people. So well, thank you guys for spending your Tuesday evening with me. This will, again, like always, be edited at some point. Got to edit that guy out from earlier. Will be edited and put up on our YouTube channel probably by the end of the week here. And like I said at the beginning, there's no wrong way to get your news out. And it's the same with using social media. There are just some ways that are better than others, and some practices that can be put into place. Even as I was reading through and researching for tonight, things that I'm going to change in the way that we do our social media or do our newsletters from National Grange, that I'm going to adjust based on current practices and current trends, which are different than when I went to school, 14, 15 years ago, and we were learning these things. So I think it's important to adapt as well and realize what's working, what's not working, and what is able to be changed without rocking the boat too much. So thank you all. We're going to end it here. I'll hang out for a little bit if anyone has other questions, and have a great night.